All right, I'm doing my second MP15AC, and I just wanted to touch base on a few things here real quick. In the nose, I'm prepping it for the step lights, which all that really is a very small ball tip bit for the Dremel. And then I left, see where that line is kind of where the wires are gonna tuck down into the area where I cut. And then kind of going around the corner, I gave it just a little bit of, removed a little bit of material too. Now if you do this, you do not want the cab anywhere near anything you're dremeling. They put those windows in using a sticky type of glue, and it's happened, and it was the biggest nightmare to get all those little pieces loose off that sticky glue. And it makes quite a mess too. So I'm kind of aiming, I'm putting it in the middle here. So just to the right of it, I will have and I've got one made up. So there's the LED, and it will go pretty much right there. And then once that's set up and totally dried, then I'll work the wires back and down into those little dips. And then in the back, there's two things going on. I did the same thing where there's a channel there, because the weight back here goes right up to the plastic. So I have to have a channel for the wire to run. And I don't know if you can see it, but if you look just below, the ones above don't really show, but the ones below you see two little scratches. And that's when I assembled it. I scribed those, but there is a step before that. I took some measurements, and this little groove is not here. It's just like my last video. I had milled it, and I kind of wish I would have had a more narrow, like a 3/16 would have been perfect, but I don't have one that small, so I think I just stepped up to a 1/4, and then I just painted afterwards. And so when it's put together, this will ensure that the LED is not getting pinched, or the wires. And then by the time they get close to the center hole, then they will transition. It's not going to be mounted on here. That slot's just for clearance. And so the light will be mounted on here. And when it gets to the two little areas I dremeled, and the best way to tell, make sure you're not getting too close, is take your time. I mean, these are very thin wires, so I've kind of overdone it. Take yourself a very powerful light, or hold it up to a powerful light, and if you see any light bleed through there, you're still okay, but that's as far as you're gonna go without busting through the deck on the other side. You don't want to do that. And then I kind of walked it around the edge here, because that black part stuck out just a little bit. And then I'll glue those wires up and around the inside. The cab, when I got it, the shades were kind of flattened, and I thought, well, I'm just going to leave it that way until I'm done. Painted the whole bottom and toward the back black, because I plan on putting a cab light in here. It's just going to be a little tiny one. It might even be a 201. I'm not sure yet. Now on the front, There were some little spots where you screwed in the decoder, and there might have been something else. I snapped those off, and then, yeah, there's two up here, and then I think there's one back here, because there was, yeah, one here and here to hold the old decoder. And as you can see, I took those off. I usually just take my needle nose, squeeze as hard as I can on it, and bend and twist, and they usually snap off. And then you very carefully file that down. And then I put a piece of styrene. I didn't show that in the last one either. And that runs along this edge, and then I had bent it, and it's glued down here as well. That's mainly just to make sure the wires don't get caught up in all this mess. So that covers here, and the decoder will cover the wires from hitting back here. Yeah, 10 lenses, 6-inch diameter, and those seem to, they're a little loose on this model, but it'll be fine. That's what'll go on the nose, because originally it had bulbs. All right, so I'm nearly done with the lights. The only one I got left is, I'm going to put one cab light up inside here. The back LEDs, you can see there's one. It's kind of in the middle of the screen. And when I'm totally done, I typically do paint around the sides, so that would be in the way of the bottom, and I'll get to that. I've already touched on that. And then the other one, so I'm getting, there we go. There's the one in the front. There's another one over on this side. So all the step lights are done. I think I said before, I kind of mark where the frame is going to meet the plastic, and just make sure I Dremel out a path so the wire doesn't get pinched. So that's what I did. It doesn't go all the way up to the LED. And then I went back and painted it. I might put a little more paint in there, just because if the light's just right, you could see through that screen and see all that white going on. That is the outgassing of the glue, as most of you know. But if you don't know, if you glue something with CA, like I'm going to do here, and then I'll run the two wires up the center between those two front lights, and then that's all I plan on doing. And I'm used to just blowing on it to help it dry faster. And then kind of like the way you blow on glass to make it fog, like you're purposely trying to fog it up. You never want to do that, because the outgassing that you saw, that white, will go straight for those windows. I did run into what was almost a problem when I ran the wires here. I'll just set it down and try to point. These two little openings in the back corners that you can see through to the tablecloth, that is where these two little tabs on the bottom go through. And I just about got myself in trouble because of the way I routed those. If I were to do it again, there's enough room on the bottom here of the floor. I would have just run them straight up and over. And then these, I'll probably tack them down along with when I put the top on. I'll have another pair to have to run up. And I've test fit it. There's no interference whatsoever. I did the same thing in the back, and I'm probably repeating myself, but that's what I did. Is I Dremeled up to this point, Get a screwdriver. My big sausage fingers in the way. So the LED's right here, and then it comes up to here. By the time the wire gets to here, because I start routering just a little ways back here, by the time I get to here, so the wires are on top. All I did is use that ball bit and router down here and router down here. And then when it goes together, this is probably the only part that's kind of tricky. Because, I mean, you can do it with a Dremel. You don't have to mill it. But what I did is I grabbed it on the very back edge here and the very front. And I recommend disassembling everything to do that, because you don't want those shavings. If you're using a Dremel or whatever, you have to make this channel, and it's only about 3/32. It's just slightly more than the LED with the 2 wires soldered on the bottom. So I ran the wires all the way down, basically into the top here, the step lights and the front lights. So it looks like there's a little loop coming up and over, and then a bigger loop going down and over. So the top one's for the step lights, and then the bottom one is a byproduct of the front headlights. So once you get 2 of them soldered in series, you want to very carefully bend them only by the wire, because these things are ultra fragile. Either 2 things are going to happen. One is not bad. You probably get mad, but it'll pop off. And if you look at the LED close and you see that there's still that tiny copper looking material, then it means you had a cold solder, and you can go back and resolder that. But it is tricky. It's small, and I'll probably cut a wire about, I don't know, about that long, just enough so I can get it, and I press it down onto where I put the solder on. And the solder I put on well, it's not double-sided tape. I just take electrical tape, cut 3 pieces, and in this case, I just press it down on my sandbar there. And then I can push it around with the tip of an LED, or X-Acto, and get the correct orientation. And then the one, it's free. But once this one is put in place, and what I do is I put a little CA down. I think I've shown these before. I came across these little alligator clips, and they're perfect. So you put it where you need it, and I might have to shave the sides down just a tiny bit, because you bring that in and let it clamp the LED right onto the step. The only thing is, it's kind of hard to look around it and make sure you're where you want to be. So I would recommend maybe after so many seconds, carefully remove them, or and make sure it's where you want it, because you probably still have time to break it free. I wouldn't try to position it. I would just try to break it free, and then maybe scrape that area lightly and then go for it again. This has worked very well for me. Once your LEDs are in the front and the cab and totally dry, go ahead and use some Elmer's, and you want to make sure there's a seal all the way around the LED and the plastic body. You don't have to dump a bunch in there, but you want to see that, like I said, it's sealed, almost like watertight. Well, not almost, because you're going to follow that up when it dries with black paint, so you don't get any light bleed. So I got the cab reassembled on here and routed my wires through to the bottom here. And I just want to go over this quickly, what I did is took it as far as I can before the components come. So the front lights, there's 2 of those seriesed. There's 2 of the rear lights seriesed. And I've got a 1,000 ohm resistor on each. Everything has a 1,000 ohm resistor except the cab light. I put a 10,000 on that one. And I still will probably use one of the brightness controls to bring it down, because I don't want it too bright in there. I did go ahead and put a tiny bit of the Tamiya clear yellow, yeah. And then I don't think I showed it, talked about it, putting the lenses in, and I like to wait until everything's done and wired and turn it on, and then go ahead and just lightly dab it with some of the clear yellow until I get the incandescent look that I want. Now on mine, I used a little bit of the Tamiya panel line for the inside, and it gives it a nice used, dirty, kind of grimy look inside. So I got the lenses in, and then I just brought all your common wires over for your power. So the parts came in today, and I'm just going through the next steps. I was going to explain that real quick. I'm not an employee with Soundtracks, but they did sponsor this, the items that I'm using here. The decoder, the 2 speakers, and a current keeper. I always like to put a current keeper on everything, but especially the switcher, because I really like switching operations, and if you keep hitting just a little bit of dirty track, it can shut down the locomotive. And it's been cleaned, and I just want it to run smooth. And after all the cleaning, I ran it just on DC, and it's running awesome. All right, so the first thing I'll do, because it's going to get 2 cubes in the nose, is I sand the bottoms flat. And so they're sand flat. And then the next thing I'm getting ready to do is, because they have a bit of an angle on them, and I don't know if I can show that, but from the left to the right side, there's a bit of an angle. So if you want to glue them together, right now they're, magnetically pushing away. So I'm going to have them configured where they're right next to each other. Then I'll solder a little jumper between the 2. But what I'm going to do is use this on a flat surface, and then take the side that I want to sand, put it down nice and flat, and go back and forth. I usually go, you could see the marks because this is fairly coarse. I'm going to go down until you can see it on the side of the cube here, about half. If you go much more than that, you're going to make the sidewall a bit too thin. And I just need to do it on one side here and one side over here, and then I'll glue those together. All right, so I went ahead and sanded the sides, like I said, glued those together on a flat surface, and then soldered a little joiner between the 2. You want to make sure that you don't get that little jumper between the 2 touching the metal back of the cubes. So they're in this configuration, it would be called in series. You don't want to try to run that in parallel, because these are 8 ohm speakers, and that's what the decoder is designed to drive. If you go parallel, it's going to make it a 4 ohm load, and that's going to overdrive the amplifier in here and most likely destroy it. So you want to make sure you're at 8 ohms or higher. And right now this in series is 16 ohms. So that's setting up in place. There's a kind of a high spot on the plastic that runs all the way up. And I just put a little bit of glue on there and then move it as far forward and just push it down. I did already test it and set the prime mover. Okay, so the decoder is just taped down with a little piece of like Scotch tape right now, and I kind of just twisted the wires off the main harness, and then for the harness in the back here for the speaker and the functions. And I just want to get a quick video showing. See, I don't have anything to hold this as I'm doing it, but in each step you can see exactly what I'm doing. That's why it's nice to have where you can remove that piece on the top of the locomotive. I've got the current keeper glued in place, and its wires, all the wires from everything are coming up through the top. So I'm going to go ahead and put the shell back on. And what I'm doing is, on this model, if you look close enough, I might try to get this before I glue it to show you. There's a little circle on each side over here from the molding process. This, the last time I checked it, on a model I did just like this, I had at least a 1/2 inch travel back and forth. But this is just something you want to do to make sure that you're not going to run into anything with the shell on before I tack this with glue and start wiring it up. So that's what I'm getting ready to do. Pull those up as I go ahead and put the shell on. All right, this is with the shell back on. And just to verify that everything's where it needs to be, because you get a lot of wires that you want to manage going up through the hole. The couplers are in their place, and it's sitting on there nice. I didn't have to fight anything. You just have to have patience and pull all this up and through. So there's one thing I didn't mention that's very important. You go ahead and connect your motor wires, and I probably could have went a little shorter, but that on this one, that's the way it should be soldered on, because after this is glued on, you see the connectors underneath, and then what I'll do is pull the wire up some, because you can see it's really the only 2 wires that I would worry about hitting this part of the motor as it spins. You don't want that to happen. So I went ahead and hooked up the red and black wires, and then you can see the gray and orange above the engine or electrical motor. And what I do is I like to just kind of pinch it, lift it up again to make sure. When all these are sort of pressed down, and they won't be pressed down much, that just ensures it's not going to make any contact with the spinning part of the motor, since this is open on top. So the pickup wires, you can see here from the front and the rear, attached to the black. Pickup wires on this side, front and back, attached to the red. And then what I did is I went ahead and put some glue down, and then just used electrical tape. Now there's a reason why I like using electrical tape. I have had vibrations just because of the sound. And, you know, one or two of these cubes can actually put out a decent amount of sound. It's quite surprising. So, one of the biggest culprits I've found with some of that vibration is the sides, the insides of the frame here, where it rests against the body, because especially on a normal size engine, that's all a long distance from front to rear, and it does ride a little loose on here. Now I'd hear a vibration and just kind of pinch the body and go away. But with electrical tape, it's a nice little insulator. So it's not only holding that down as it's drying, it's probably dry by now, but I just went ahead and left it on, pulled all the wires up through the hole in the body at another time just now, and tested it on the track back and forth, and everything's working great. So I've hooked up just one of the functions. I want to test how the front lights would look, and they're nice and bright. So you can see I've got the main power, which is your blue, going to all the positives, going out to every LED. And right now the only one that's connected is the front headlight. So really, I just have to take these off to the side so they wouldn't get in the way. Put it on the test track and made sure it was working. Alright, so all the wires are connected. The current keeper's down here plugged in on the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and carefully fish these wires up through the hole as I put the shell on. Just making sure that these on the pickup wires on the side or any other don't get trapped between the shell and the frame. And so I got everything back together. You just have to have patience, and I use tweezers and carefully just kind of place everything, pull it up through the hole, and check the size of the frame and the body when you're putting it on, so you're not pinching anything. It does have a little bit of interference where the electrical tape is, and I like that because that's telling me that it's that interference, if there were to be any vibration, it's riding on that electrical tape on both sides. So I've pulled the wires up as far as I could for now. Alright, so it's all finished up. Got the wires tucked back in there and that piece back on. I did go around on every LED and put just a real thin coat of that Tamiya yellow. It's clear yellow. So you see the lights are nice and bright. There's two separate 402 LEDs in each one. And it looks just a bit more yellow in real life, but at least it's not like real bright or have that bluish hue that it normally looks like. And then let me turn on, there's the ground lights, and then the step lights, and then I have an interior light. So you can kind of see in the top of the cab that had a 10,000 ohm resistor. Plus I put the type of light on. You have two different dimmer type outputs. Like when you go into setup for strobe or whatever you want the lights to be, you can select a dimmable light, and there's two of them. There's a 1 and a 2, and then CV 61 and 62, you can go in and dial in your brightnesses. Let me see. It's not a very professional camera, so I'm trying to get, there we go. That's a little bit more realistic to what it looks like in real life, because it's trying to overexpose. You can see the step lights on the front and the rear. And if I get underneath here a little bit, you can see the ground light. So that turned out great. And then for the, I call it engine interlock. And I'd have to go back and look in the manual, but it's CV114. And I just put a 15 in there. And then a 16, you add those two up, you got 31. And that allows the engine to remain quiet until you give it an input. And it's as simple as that. And then when you want to turn it off, you just bring the locomotive to a stop and press 6. And it'll go ahead and, if you're in the lowest notch, it'll go ahead and shut the engine down for you. I like that feature. Alright, so I just want to turn the lights back on. I put a little bit of the deceleration and acceleration in it, so it starts and stops nice and smooth. And I also programmed the DDE, where you go in and it takes a calibration off the engine at speed step 1, and then you can do it again at a higher speed step. I usually go over 30. I can't go too fast because it's only 8-foot track. And what that does is it calibrates how much power the motor's using typically. So if you're going uphill or pulling cars, it will automatically notch up. So let's go and get this thing started. And any flashing you see from the LEDs is from the camera. It's not, you wouldn't see that in life. Only the camera can pick that up. The volume right now is turned down to 1/4, so that's 64, and the highest volume you can do is 255, but that's just way overkill. With these two cubes, it gives it a really good sound. It's allowed to come out the screens and out the bottom where the truck is. Sounds really good. And so I'll give you a quick example of what I was talking about. I've got it down to, my throttle down to 1. And so if it meets resistance, you can hear how the engine is throttling up automatically to compensate for that load. And as soon as I remove my finger, it goes back to normal. Now if I press 6, it'll go ahead and do a shutdown. And that's it. Well, thank you, and I hope that some of you out there that maybe have one of these Athearn Genesis MP15ACs or thinking about getting one, now you can see how all the equipment fits in there. It's really nice. Like I said, with the current keeper, let's see, just turn the bell on. Just kind of, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I put a current keeper on everything, because most layouts, that's probably what gets neglected the most, is the track. And it's just not realistic and not very fun to have to, you know, keep pushing the locomotive or stop and clean all the tracks. So that current keeper is a must for me. So anyway, I just wanted to give a special thank you out to Soundtracks for sponsoring this, the components that went in the engine. I really appreciate you guys. And they're an American company, which I take great pride in buying their products. They, in my opinion, have superior products, and I've installed a lot of them, and I've never had anybody come back and be dissatisfied in any way. So thank you for watching, and hopefully, like I said, if you want to get one of these or do one, now you see what it takes to do it. And it's just a little time, a little patience, but they turn out great. They're worth it. Thank you.